Hello there, yes. Well, is he going to mention it? Well, I suppose I'll have to today, won't I? Yeah. It's good news that British defence money is being spent to make sure that Israel can destabilise a region. One of the things that's perhaps most ironically amusing about this stuff is, as rightly Aaron Bastani from Navarra Media points out, is whenever you destabilise that part of the world, it actually ends up with vast numbers of refugees being displaced, many of whom will want to come here. One of the things that those people that cheer on Israel don't really seem to get their heads round very much, yeah? No, because that involves joined up thinking. Anyway, today, fresh week, and I have to go back to work in the rain. So I'm probably going to have to get on a bus today. But my eye was drawn. My eye is often drawn indeed, but I was drawn to Dan Wootton yesterday, who decided to make a bit of a splash. We'll come on to the reasons why a bit later on. Yesterday, with his 50 freedom fighters. Yeah, countdown 50 freedom fighters. And I think he's using the word freedom fighter in a way that almost everybody on the planet would not quite understand. But it's worthwhile just sort of going through some of the list and some of the reasons why he's given, certainly for the top 10, because Jesus, there's no way I'm going to subscribe. Anyway, yeah, Dan Wootton, you may remember that he had to be let go with the whole Loza Fox misogyny thing. And basically I would imagine that it's quite tricky for him to find more gainful employment because people will be spending their lives checking for hidden cameras. Allegedly, as they say. So I'm not really surprised that he's having to strike out on his own, but we'll come back to that particular one. So let's look at some of the choice names on his top 50. I must admit I don't recognise some of them, but I'm not a 14-year-old American Nazi, and again we'll come on to them. So number 49 we have Posey Parker. Yes, freedom fighter, absolutely. Women's rights specialist who doesn't seem to enormously be into women's rights. We've got Andy No, who, as we know full well, has somehow managed to make a name for himself by poking Antifa in the ribs, metaphorically or otherwise. At number 45, there's actually both the Tate brothers, astoundingly, on the list. Now, I imagine that there are lots of jokes you could make around the notions of freedom and fighting for around the Tate brothers, but it would probably be with people wanting to get out of the room away from them. Let's face it, yeah? And of course we have Glinner, yeah, a man who is fighting for the freedom to, I don't know, probably not see his kids, but certainly call anyone a nonce at 2:30 in the morning. There's Julia. Julia got into a bit of a problem at the weekend because, like a lot of right-wingers, might come back to this one, but deciding that the fatal stabbings that were happening in Sydney were definitely isn't an Islamic terrorist until, of course, we found out it wasn't. Yes, there's our top 50, Coast Guy, a guy who still has managed to keep his job by not actually mentioning capitalism because that would be too threatening, obviously. Our next 10 includes such wonderful people as Sargon of Akkad, who you'll know better as Carl Benjamin, yeah, rape apologist. Calvin Robinson, yes, a man that doesn't like gay people, but we'll leave that aside, eh, Dan? Yeah, we'll leave that aside, eh, Dan? We're not going to let that bother us, are we, Dan? Yes, what else have we got here? Isabel Oakeshott, yeah, because, she's a person somewhere along the line, I guess, if you did a DNA test somewhere along the line. Freedom fighter. What exactly are the freedoms that Isabel has ever fought for? Nigel Farage and Robert Kennedy Jr. Yes, Nigel Farage, a man who has fought for British freedoms, and I'm sure you noticed that you feel an awful lot more free than you did 8 years ago. It's working so well. Let's carry on with our list, shall we? He's got Matt Tabai on there, and I don't really understand why, because Matt Tabai is somebody who basically sold out to Elon Musk. Maybe that's the reason. Might come on to that in just a second. And of course, Jordan Peterson, everyone's favourite mentally ill lobster fan. Yes, a guy who is so totally irrelevant that nobody of Dan's age actually realises it. You need to be as old as me to understand how irrelevant it is and work with some young people. Yes, and moving on, we've got inevitably Toadmeister, yes, Lord Young's boy, who's a real freedom fighter. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what freedom it is. I think it's the freedom to comment on women's breasts and be rude to trans people. Dougie Murray, obviously, big Israel fan there, as we well know. Alison Pearson makes number 11 in the world. Yeah, I imagine people will be manning the barricades on her sage advice. Jesus Christ. And the top 10. We get into the top 10. We've got Dave Chappelle, who actually cites as a man who stands up against the trans. No, he's just a comedian who ties into people's prejudices. That's all you can say about him, yeah? Obviously, Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson. Again, we'll come on to reasons for that in a second. Ricky Gervais, freedom fighter. No, he's just a washed-up comic who has found that people will pay him money to be anti-trans. That's as far as you can go with that one. J.K. Rowling, yes, who is, after all, the that staunch protector of women's rights, unless it's maybe abortion or many other things. Yeah, I mean, he actually managed to say about Liz Truss, who's there, that she exposed the deep state. No, she gave it as an excuse why she was the worst ever Prime Minister. And of course Elon Musk is at number 1 because we all know how free we all feel on Twitter, unless we use the word cis, which of course is banned. I mean, you know, I can be as racist as I like and nothing will really happen on Twitter. I have that freedom, but I don't have the freedom to use the word cis because that will land me in all sorts of hot water. But one has to say, well, why is Dan doing this? Well, Dan needs to position himself on his new media platform, if you like, okay? Because, like I say, I don't think anyone realistically wants to be anywhere near him. So he has to suck up to these people. Lots of these grifters will suck up to each other because the way that they will gain a following and exposure is by being invited onto a lot of these people, their shows. Other ones, it's just kind of useful because there's a kind of name recognition. Because Dan is unfortunately competing in that market for that kind of 14-year-old American neo-Nazi sitting in their bedroom audience. Anybody who's a rational human being would take one look at this list and laugh at least half the names there. The other half we don't recognise because you have to be a 14-year-old neo-Nazi from America to actually recognise who these people are. Utterly meaningless. People involved in libertarian rights who are about an inch away from fascism at best. But they do, of course, contain the potential riches for the future, which is what Dan is after, because ultimately his ultimate freedom will be his freedom to make as much money as he possibly can do. Imagine being as rich as Meghan. Ooh. Anyway, that was me being rude for a bit, wasn't it? But Jesus, these people. Yeah? Freedom fighters. I mean, the complete and utter bastardisation of any meaning, yeah, it's not really Zapata, is it? It's not really any notion of ordinary people. Liz Truss makes the top 10. J.K. Rowling is number 2 because she fights for the rights of women in some places, usually standing next to Posey Parker when she's trying to flog some clothes. And Dan basically belongs to the same crew. We're all used to people like this. They're always those slightly larger characters that elbow their way to the front of the queue. And that's metaphorically what the guy is doing once again here. And good luck to him. I wish him all the best in his future endeavours. The problem is, of course, that I have to stare at this drivel on my social media feed, and I don't really particularly want to, because it is drivel. Anyway, do have a lovely Monday. Stay dry, and yeah, we'll see when the air raid sirens go, I guess. Yeah.